just wanted to kind of give you guys a bit of a just general walkthrough. This is going to be kind of informal, just because I really just want to give you guys kind of the high level of how I use the assets and what I did with them, and kind of just the general my general views on them as well. So starting off, most of the assets, or actually all of the assets, are imported directly off of the Megascans site. And if I just hop on into my login here, and we'll just jump over to the library, we can come right on over into packs. And this is actually part of what I pulled from. Actually, the majority of this is all what I pulled from. So you have, you can see kind of here clearly, all of the assets, all from relatively, it looks like they're from the same biome. There's also more assets and stuff available. They're updating this as they go, which is really nice. But I really wanted to talk about, kind of the process of downloading these things and really why I feel that the Megascans are so useful. When we're pulling the assets and we're kind of downloading them all, we have access to, obviously, the albedo, the cavity, the displacement, the normal, the roughness. But here we have access to the high poly, the Z tool, the LODs, and the brushes that are made. Okay, what this allows us to do is you literally have something that's one-to-one with the scan data, but then you can take that and make your own things with it, which is so vital. The Megascans, I think a lot of times people think, well, this is just scan data, I'm locked into this. You're not. You have total control over the asset from just a general texturing and modeling standpoint as well, because you have the source data, which is so useful. Because this is kind of one of the huge reasons why I think Quixel stuff is so useful. Not only do you get the high poly, but you also get all of the Z tools and the brushes. Okay, now the scan data itself is really high quality, but I'm sure, just like any of you guys who use CG Textures or any other texture website, you guys also know that you have to vary the content, otherwise all your stuff starts looking like everyone else's. You can do that really easily with this stuff now, especially because they give exposure to all of the assets. It's something that I think is monumentally huge to these guys. Obviously, the scan data is of a ridiculously high quality. You want to be able to alter and control them, so you have the ability to do all of that with the source content that they give. And I've even modified some things, and I'll show you some of the modifications that I made in the shaders a little later. But there's a lot of flexibility in the content, and that allows you to really iterate with stuff, and it allows you to honestly spend your time in kind of some really, I think a bit more creative of a space. Don't get me wrong, I love sculpting rocks. I've been sculpting them for years, but if I can spend 6, maybe 7 hours to build a full scene, that's pretty good. And we have to, for me at least, I always try to tell people you got to balance the artistic side with also the production side, and really making sure that you are leveraging those in a really good and creative way. The scan data is ridiculously awesome to use, and I think it allows you to start getting into the creative flow a little quicker. So let's jump back into Unreal. We're going to talk just kind of briefly about the general process for laying out the map and kind of the ease of use of everything, and really just talk about some of the shaders and talk a little bit about some of the optimization stuff that you can utilize with the scan data. And I'm sure I'll talk a lot about my views on scan data, because I do think it's just like anything in our field. When it's new, people are very apprehensive about it, but it's definitely the future, and it's here to stay. So I want to talk a little bit about that as well. And let's talk a little bit more about what what I did in the process that I took with laying out the scene and kind of just going through and roughly creating it. When I do a lot of these kind of environments, I'm definitely not the #1 expert in this, but I have a lot of fun with them, and I really like to use the foliage tool, especially for using a ton of these assets. I mean, you can actually see how many foliage assets in the scene they're pulling from. Nothing super crazy in terms of settings on the foliage actors. Literally used most of their default settings. I adjusted the density a little bit. They were really straightforward to use. So in terms of just general asset fidelity, this stuff is fantastic. I mean, you know, it's really high res, really well detailed. I didn't do anything super crazy with the shaders. I do want to show you guys my shader workflow. Let me just pull up my details panel here. And I just wanted to call out the assets a little bit here. So try to stay fairly clean, even though it's me, so I probably didn't do the best job. But let's go ahead and look at one of these assets here. Let's go ahead and grab this guy. And I want to talk a little bit about some things under the hood and some things about the shading. So let's first start with the shading, because that's always the fun part. We can see here I didn't go in and compress and do any RMA mapping with this, or MRA, depending on what you're doing. I really just took the assets as is. The goal of this was just to really create content, kind of get used to it. So I basically made a base PBR shader. Let's go ahead and look at this. I actually made 2 versions of this, and I'll show you the kind of the basic rundown. Really, just make this big so you guys can see it. Really, really simple things here, right? I have an albedo. I have a multiply to give me control over the brightness. I have this use cavity as overlay switch, and that's just looking up to a blend node with the cavity map, and again a cavity adjustment parameter. That all gets multiplied against the vertex color. I'll show you why that happens a little later. I have a metallic input. I also have my roughness controls. Same things with displacement. I also have some trace things that I'm doing with the displacement when I want to use them. So basically it'll tessellate further, closer or further away, depending on camera viewing distance. In terms of just general performance, tessellation is expensive, so just bear in mind that if you're trying to do this, you have to be really wise with it. And of course, detail texturing. And those all get fed into material instances. And I cannot stress this enough with you guys. Material instances are fantastic. They really do help a lot. Really quick, since we're actually talking about materials, I do want to just touch base on this. This is super standard, and I know people know this, but I'm just going to bring it up anyway because I do think it's important. And I always forget to do this for some reason. Whenever I built a million plants in Unreal, and every time I do it, I always forget to do it. This is pretty basic plant setup. Also, just in terms of you guys who are looking at this, like asking about optimization and stuff, I did not do any channel mapping or embedded mapping. Basically, I'm not combining the RGBA channels to make a single draw call. You would definitely want to do that if you were doing this for anything, basically, for game, mobile, whatever, just to save. But for the demo, I didn't do that. It's just easier for me to kind of just show everything. But in terms of optimization, you definitely would want to combine these. You'd want your alpha channel to probably be embedded in your albedo and whatnot. But anyway, basic setup here. I like to have control over the albedo in case I need to darken it. Same in roughness inversion, just to be safe. Alpha mask goes in. Normal map, no detail mapping on this. I have a transmission map, and that's going to get multiplied against the constant float, and that's plugged into the subsurface color. And I'm just utilizing a simple grass and wind shader. It's really easy to do, so super, super useful. Let me just kind of close out of this. Don't save that. And let me just change this window size, and I'll show you just kind of how this thing controls. Let's zoom over here so you can see the backside of this. And if you're wondering why it's getting darker and whatnot, I have clouds that are passing over the top to kind of simulate, hey, that you're outside. And those are not set up efficiently, so I'll talk about that in a second. They're not set up in a good way. Anyway, the subsurface scattering, I'm just going to adjust this so you can see it. So you see it getting darker, right? And that's pretty much what this would be if you weren't really utilizing the subsurface shader. So this gives you some really nice light bleed, get the shadowing coming through it. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Looks really nice. What else before we go and talk about the scan assets and whatnot? Scattering was handled utilizing a combination of the drag and drop method. So again, really basic stuff. Literally static mesh filter, and then I literally just start going, I like that there, and that was the extent of it. Let me just grab you, delete you, and of course utilizing the foliage tools because they are awesome. You can kind of go in and really quickly just place a bunch of stuff really fast. The lighting setup is really straightforward. It's single directional, single skylight with atmospheric fog, and I think there's a little bit of fog in here as well. And I'm utilizing a distance field along with directional light contact shadows. So really, really useful, really simple and easy to do. So I also really quickly wanted to just give a shout out to Eon about this. Eon helped me out with a bunch of questions, and he was just a really great resource. The guy is hella talented too. He does some really awesome landscapes. So check out his stuff. And again, thanks Eon for the help. I really do appreciate it. And so again, you can see that the layout for this stuff, really generic, really straightforward and simple. Just close this down. Sorry, my computer is running so slow. I'm trying to capture this video in HD, and I don't really want to shut down programs because, I don't know, I'm doing other work. So let's talk about the vertex painting really quick while we're in here. And just so you guys can kind of see this. Again, this isn't anything crazy. Like, nothing that I'm doing with this is, like, insane or unique to this. This is just really getting in there and just utilizing the assets, and we'll let the clouds pass over us really quick so you guys can see this. But basically, I'm just darkening the roughness in the albedo contribution, so it gives me a really nice wet look. And I'll change this guy up so it's white so you can see this. Right, so you can see here where it's darker and the roughness is adjusted to give it that wet look. And you can see here on these rocks it's really prevalent as well. Get the nice sheen off of it. And it's subtle. Like, honestly, it's maybe, I don't think it's overkill, but it's subtle, right? And that's not bad. That's kind of the stuff that you're after in a lot of cases. What else? Let's talk a little bit, too, about performance. And this has already been done once, so let me see if I can find an asset that doesn't have the LODs made. Not that guy. Who's this guy? Yeah, he doesn't have the LODs made. Okay. So for you guys who are interested in this stuff, performance is monumentally important in general. When you download the assets off of the Megascans site, and when you log into it, it'll look like this. You have, I'll just pull this up really quick. You have, when you do real-time rendering, you have a bunch of options here. Obviously, you have your sizes and all of those kind of things. But you have a bunch of these switches here. And this is one of the things that I think makes Megascans so useful is, again, because they're a bunch of artists, they understand how important having all of this stuff is. And they give you, like, literally all of the source content, the scan data, the Z tools, the brushes that they use, because, you go in and they'll generate brushes for you to help sculpt stuff and add extra information. And they give all of that to you, which is super useful. And the LODs, if you guys have ever done LODs, they're not hard, they're just a pain in the butt, because you got to export things, you got to make like 3 different versions of the mesh, and you got to realign them, and it can be kind of painful. However, in Unreal 4.14, they introduced, and they even had this before, they were using SimpleGon, but now this is just embedded in the engine, which is effing awesome. Let's come down here to the LOD settings here. And we're going to say this is a small prop. Absolutely. And it's going to rebuild the distance fields because this is the first time I've done it on this prop. But I don't, I'll let this kind of process through so the computer isn't screaming. It's what happens when you have like 2 huge graphics cards in the box. Anyway, so I want you to pay attention to up here, this guy at the top left of the screen. If I zoom out, you can see it doing the auto decimation, and this is happening based off of screen space, which is super, super rad. And you don't really have to do anything. It's just something you do when you're adjusting your light map settings. So you can go ahead and minimize that, and I mean, you can't even tell. So that's really useful, super helpful. The other thing to talk about, and I know that people have questions about this, especially if they're doing stuff in VR, if they're doing stuff for mobile devices. Uh, some really nice performance considerations to check in, especially if you're dealing with a bunch of assets. You probably really want to check out the HLOD system, especially if you're going to be dealing with multiple draw calls, especially if you have a lot of assets that are just kind of out there. For example, we have this guy and these two guys right here, right? And they're the same assets, right? Now, the way Unreal works is it goes, oh, cool, they're sharing the same material, they're sharing the same textures, cool, those, we're going to save on those. It's one basic fetch, well, not one fetch, but it's basically one savings for those. However, the mesh data, that's placed twice in the world, so sorry, it's 2 additional draw calls for the mesh. It's just, it is what it is. So you can batch it in the distance, and the batching system is really nice because it'll auto-generate, auto-cluster, and auto-decimate, and auto-atlas if you tell it to the textures, which is really, really useful. So it really works out well in that regard. So in general, I've got to say the overall experience working with the scan data was fantastic. You know, I never really have any issues ever working with the Quixel guys. They're always so nice. But you know, in all honesty, though, especially listening to a lot of artists and stuff and addressing concerns and stuff, scan data is here. It's useful. It's something that is going to be part of our jobs. Even stylized stuff can utilize good scan data. It's really about, for me, it's about time saving and where I can, spend my time, and where the things I don't really want to spend my time on, like doing billions of pebbles and those kind of things. It's not that they're fun. It's just that during the run of a day, if you're building out a bunch of environments, and depending on where you are in your career, you're maybe managing people, you do have to figure out ways to maximize your time. And I feel the scan data is just a great way to do that. You get super high fidelity mesh assets. There's consistency in the assets, so you know if you need to change or alter something, you can set up a consistent pipeline for it. So it's really, really useful. And I recommend, playing around with it and kind of embracing it, because I remember back when, kind of move around so it's a little bit more visually interesting. I remember back in the day when I was doing stuff, when ZBrush first came out, and no one wanted to touch ZBrush. They were like, oh, this is cheating, this is terrible, you can't do that. Now everyone uses it. So, it's oftentimes it's just adjusting to new things, and that is a vital part of your job as an artist in this field, is adapting, growing, seeing kind of what the latest technology is, and seeing how you can leverage it for your own platforms. So you guys, if you have any questions, shoot me a message on Facebook. And just again, huge shout out to everyone who helped on this. It was a lot of fun. In terms of just general asset or general layout time and stuff, I think I've probably spent only like 6 to 8 hours. Honestly, the longest parts of this stuff, or tedious parts, I guess, would be importing the assets and making the videos. If you've ever talked to me in person, I swear like a sailor, so it takes a few videos for me to get that out. Anyway, thank you guys so much, and I encourage you guys to be checking out the Megascans content. It's extremely useful. It's really, really, an extremely high fidelity. If you even look at the assets inside of ZBrush, this is one of the scan data pieces. It's an awesome base to start sculpting off of and to build a really nice kit bash library off of. Fidelity is fantastic. We have a ton and ton of really great scan data, and it's super, super useful to be able to look at this thing from any angle and go, let's just pull from this side here, and we're just going to come over here and grab dock that. Okay, we have a really nice now alpha stamp that we can use to pull on other assets. And obviously, you guys can sculpt the hell out of this. Okay, the thing that I would just, I tell everyone about this is like your plant libraries. This is like anything else. They are tools to help you get into the mode of creating content faster. I definitely recommend that every artist who's using this stuff at least knows how to make the content. Maybe not to the level of fidelity of a scan. It is a laser that's scanning a physical asset. but it's important to know how to make it. But it's also important to know how to make it so you can know where to save time and where your cost is going. And your cost, when I talk about cost in terms of asset development, cost deals with performance. It deals with the amount of time it takes you to build it. It deals with the amount of time and the money that you bill your clients or to your studios that you work for. So, figuring all that stuff out will help you be a more efficient artist in general, which is really good. And again, this is mesh data. Stuff is flexible with so many different pipelines. It's ridiculous. The other awesome things to kind of check out and to think about are all of the surface scans that are available on Megascan, the Megascan website. That in conjunction with the Megascan Studio, the possibilities are really, frankly, endless. You can really do a lot with them, especially since you have the mesh data. You can get the actual positional information, so you can actually start really procedurally texturing things in a really efficient way. A little bit more of the scene off. The fog, I have the atmosphere and exponential fog on, and then I also have some basic particles that are controlling the fog settings, which are kind of useful. And like I said, as of right now, or in the scene for this recording, I don't have the displacement turned on, but the displacement works rather well, and the displacement maps hold up really, really well as well. So this is kind of just a basic overview of how I approached kind of using the Megascans. For me in the future, especially for organic spaces, I'll be using these things all the damn time. When it comes to production and comes to just general time usage, right, you have to kind of evaluate what you're spending your time on. And for me, having such good high-quality assets, even if I don't end up using all of the textures, or even if it gets me to 50% of the way there, it's going to be super, super useful, and it really does help out on the long term. So, I recommend checking these things out. I think scan data is just going to be part of the workflow. I mean, since you have access to the height information, to the normal information, to all the textures, you can take this stuff and you can make all of this photoreal, quote unquote, assets. You can totally turn them stylized, and you can do it really, really quickly. It doesn't require a ton of rework. And for artists and stuff, especially environment guys and girls, like, we have so many assets to juggle and to manage, and so many things to kind of balance against, that a lot of it is trying to figure out what the heck to do with your time and trying to figure out where to spend your time, because you can't spend 8 hours a day on every single asset, and you sure as hell can't spend 12 hours a day on every asset. So if you can get the debris and the scattering stuff kind of out of the way and done quicker in a faster way, I think it's really useful. And whenever I always hear this question always come up, like, is scan data cheating? Do you think you're cheating? The first thing I say is, like, especially if we're doing video game stuff like real-time rendering, it's all a cheat. It's all running on a computer. We're all faking stuff to try and get it to work. But it does definitely, in my opinion, come down to, where do you want to spend your time? I would encourage every single artist to know how to sculpt a tree or to make a rock to any of these levels of quality. It's very doable to do it by hand. It just takes a bunch of time, right? So it's useful for everyone to know how to do it, but do you need to do it for every single thing? Absolutely not. And I think, especially the longer I've been in productions, the longer I've been doing this stuff, the more and more I've worked with a multitude of very talented artists. A lot of it is just trying to figure out, they spend their time in really accurate areas or really specific areas. And for me, it's trying to play with the lighting, trying to play with the composition, trying to get stuff that looks, really good in a reasonable amount of time. So again, the Quixel tools were fantastic to use. I highly, highly recommend them. And before we go, I'm going to show you guys some of my processes for just scattering stuff out really quickly and placing stuff in the world. Nothing too fancy, but it'll at least give you guys hopefully a nice little hint on where to go. So thank you guys so much for checking this out. This is a quick little demo that they asked me to kind of put together for them, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed working with it. It was quick, it was easy, obviously, because I didn't have to model all the stuff out. But the flexibility with this stuff in future projects is definitely something that I'll be heavily utilizing, and it just helps in the general creative process. You know, you really get to do a lot with this, and it really does help. So, thanks so much for watching, and we'll talk to you guys. Peace.